a pizza made with a unique cheese, the battle over an iconic dish's invention, and why toasted raviolis weren't originally breaded. This week, we're back in St. Louis.
Traveling the world to bring you delicious dishes, tasty beverages, and interesting experiences. This is the Destination Eat Drink Podcast on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
I'm Brent Peterson. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink, the travel podcast for foodies. This is where we sample the best dishes and drinks from around the world, and this week we're back in St. Louis with Pete Manzo with side trips to Tuscany and Puglia, Italy. But first, if you could rate and review the podcast, I'd greatly appreciate it. Just go to your podcast app and give us a 5-star review, and thank you so very, very much. Pete Manzo is a foodie tour guide in St. Louis who takes guests to the famous Italian neighborhood of The Hill. He also does week-long tours in Tuscany and Puglia in Italy. Pete and I talked about The Hill last week and some of the best bakeries and gelato in the neighborhood, and this week we talk about 2 St. Louis specialties, St. Louis-style pizza and toasted ravioli. Then Pete talks about truffle hunting with some uber-adorable dogs in Tuscany and relaxing in Puglia. Okay, I'm starving for some toasted ravs, so let's eat.
Destination Eat Drink.
Pete Manzo from Eat St. Louis Food Tours. Thanks for coming back. We talked to you last week a little bit about the Hill in St. Louis and some of the great food in St. Louis, especially Italian food, but ran out of time, and there's more to talk about in St. Louis, and we've got to talk about going to Italy with your groups. So thanks for returning to Destination Eat Drink. It's great to have you back.
Oh, it's great to be here again. Thank you so much.
I want to talk about a couple of specific dishes in St. Louis that are unique to St. Louis. And the first one is St. Louis style pizza, which is something I grew up in the Midwest. I'm a Chicago guy. I did not know about St. Louis style pizza until I started doing this podcast. I didn't know that it was a thing. And then I heard about this and I just thought it was so unique. Can you tell me a little bit about St. Louis style pizza? Share with our audience what it is exactly.
Absolutely. So St. Louis style pizza has 3 components. You got the crust. The crust is thin, somewhat cracker-like, and we cut our slices into squares as opposed to wedges. The sauce component, if you think about it, New York likes to use like a thinner sauce, like a passata. Chicagoans like to see chunks of tomatoes in their pizza sauce. St. Louis's pizza sauce is actually very thick. It's sweet, more concentrated. It's almost a paste. It's almost like a tomato paste.
Okay.
And actually, what's interesting is that, and I only know this from, like I said, my background in the wholesale. Back in the day when there were not pizzerias on every corner, those pizzerias that did exist would make their own pizza sauce, and they would start in the morning by putting their fresh tomatoes, and they'd stew it low and slow all day. And then by the time evening came around and they had to make the pizzas, their sauce was ready. And so you know that as you cook something low and slow, what happens? It thickens and it brings out the sweetness. You know, that's sort of how it became the basic part of the St. Louis style pizza. You know, later on, when people started to figure out how to save time, they started using canned tomato paste and would doctor it up with spices. So, but that has never changed. The fact that it's a very thick sauce, whether you do it, you know, you start it on your own or you buy it, the paste in the can and doctor it up, that's going to be the base. But I think most important out of the whole style of St. Louis style pizza, what makes it St. Louis style besides those 2? It's going to be the cheese. The cheese, get ready for this. It's a very unique cheese that is made specifically for the St. Louis market. It's called Provel, Provel. And it's a processed cheese loaf that's made in Wisconsin specifically for our area. It was actually developed by a company that is no longer in business, but it is made out of, it was called the Costa Grocery Company. It was developed in the 1950s, but it's a processed cheese loaf that is made or comprised of white cheddar, provolone, and Swiss. So when I say processed cheese loaf, it's sort of like, you've seen those white American
Mm-hmm.
5-pound square loaves. So this sort of looks the same, but obviously the taste is going to be a lot different, much sharper because of the cheddar and the provolone that's in it. You end up being in one of two camps. You either love it or you hate it, the cheese. And St. Louis, I always say, I don't know if they made some sort of baby food out of this stuff and fed it to all the children, but it seems like everybody in St. Louis just loves this cheese. And so they put it on everything, everywhere. You'll go into a restaurant and they'll have garlic cheese bread, which I guess, traditionally might be made out of, have some mozzarella or something on it. But here, because it's St. Louis, they're going to throw some Provel on it. You go to a restaurant, you order a salad. Oh my goodness, surprise, surprise, there's Provel on the salad. It's everywhere.
Whether you love it or you hate it, the thing I love is that this regional dish has become so popular and has had staying power in St. Louis. The St. Louis style pizza and the Provel cheese. Where do you like to go to get a St. Louis style pie when you're in St. Louis?
I'm gonna answer that in two parts, because where I go and then where the majority of people go are going to be two different places. But and I'm not saying one is better than the other, but and I got to tell you that when I give my tours, a whole disclaimer in the beginning where I say, hey, you're going to hear a lot of opinion, but that's essentially what you paid me for. So if you don't like what I say, don't, turn it off. But I've got a lot of opinions because I've been around a long time. So on the hill, I go to Guido's. Guido's is actually owned by a family that was from Spain, and they were one of the first restaurants to have tapas, to bring tapas to the area. But the owner, Miguel Carretero, actually has a history of being a pizzaiolo. So he opened his own pizzeria when he was young. He's about 4 years older than I am. So while I was working for my dad, he had his own pizza place in South City, and he was developing his recipe for pizzas. So one of the things I love about his pizza is I have mixed feelings about Provel. I'm going to be honest. Sometimes it's like has a tendency to stick to the roof of your mouth. What he does, and I think he realized this too when he was dealing with the public and he would get the feedback from the people that went into his pizzeria, was he decided to blend it, and he came up with a great blend of mozzarella and Provel. So, there's something to be said about the psychological portion of eating, and especially pizza. When you bite into a pizza, no matter where you're from, you have this sort of, you expect the cheese to sort of, what's the word I'm looking for?
To stretch and be creamy, be a little creamy.
Stretch, yes. Yeah, because mozzarella has that sort of stretchiness. So if you have a Provel only pizza, like Emo's does, I'll talk about Emo's in a minute, but there are some pizza places that use Provel only. And when you use Provel only, there's no stretch. So the mildness of the mozzarella plus the sharpness of the Provel just seems to be perfect. So that's why I go to Guido's. Now the rest of the world, everybody else in St. Louis tends to go to emos. And I have to say, if you are a purist and you want to experience it the way it originated, emos is the place to go. It is a chain, but it is owned by a St. Louis family who is a very generous family that has given back several fold to the Hill and in other communities. But a lot of people think that emos is, and when I say emos, it's IMO. A lot of people think that emos originated the St. Louis style pizza. And they think this because it's such an old company that has been part of the fabric of St. Louis for so long that if you don't do any research, that's sort of a natural assumption. But it was actually a Joe and Lou Parente of this is a little fun fact. It was actually a very small outfit called Joe and Lou Parente's Pizza that actually used Provel while everybody else was using mozzarella. And they're the ones that developed this special St. Louis style. But Emos does deserve credit. I'm all for giving credit where credit is due. The Marge and Eddie Emo get credit for popularizing it. They brought it to the masses by franchising the idea. They opened their first location, I think it was November of 64. Yeah, I think it was 1964. And they were the first to offer delivery and takeout. So they made it easy to purchase it and eat it. And it became very popular very quickly. So if you're coming through St. Louis and you don't have a lot of time, because a lot of the emos places are takeout only, or some may still have some dine-in areas, but mostly it's a takeout situation. You can grab a pizza for the road, but that, yeah, I mean they're the ones that have been doing it the longest, so they know how it. If you're a purist, that's the place I would say go to. Like for my sister lives in Georgia. Every time I pick her up at the airport, we have to stop at Emo's on the way home. We have to get a pizza because she cannot wait one moment more without her Emo.
She's like,
pizza.
Pete, I'd love to see the family, but first things first, we're going to Emo's.
Absolutely. All about, I see where her priorities are.
Let's talk about another St. Louis invention, which is toasted ravioli. Now, maybe a lot of people haven't heard of St. Louis style pizza, but everyone's heard of toasted ravioli because it became popular in, I don't know, the 80s or the 90s. It seemed every restaurant was then making toasted ravioli. But tell me a little bit about the history of toasted ravs and where you like to go to get a nice plate of toasted ravioli.
Toasted ravioli. Wow. Did you open up a can of worms on that one?
That's my job, Pete.
Well, so we've got two restaurants that both claim that they originated it. We've got Charlie Gito's, and they're both located on the Hill. We've got Charlie Gito's, and then we have Mama's, formerly Mama Campisi's, and then so. While both of them don't have like something that says, this is for sure where it originated. So neither of them really have any proof. They both just sort of agreed to both claim it, and people can just decide where they want to eat their ravioli. And optimally, maybe they'll eat at both and make their own decision which one they like, better. But as you may or may not have heard, it was actually an accident, how it came about. Mama's restaurant, which is actually where we stop currently, on the Hill, is one of the places. And the story is that there was a nearby restaurant where after work, all of the employees waiters and everything would go down to Mama's and relax and talk to Chef Fritz. They go in the back door in the kitchen. And one day, Chef Fritz was making veal scallopini with red wine. And instead of putting the red wine in the veal scallopini, he was drinking most of it. So he got a little
Okay.
toasted, if you will. You like my play on words?
Yes, I do.
So he got a little toasted, and an order came back in the kitchen for ravioli. So he got the ravioli ready, and then because he was a little tipsy, he accidentally dropped it into the vat of hot oil, which was next to the boiling water. So he put it in the wrong pot, essentially. And then he realized his mistake. And if you know any Italians, we don't waste anything.
Ain't throwing it out.
He wasn't going to throw them away. He's not going to throw it out. He sent it up to the table that ordered it. He said, just tell them it was something special that the chef was working on. He made it especially for them. Well, it turns out that the people actually loved it. Yeah, it was like these were guys that were gathered around the bar and they were drinking beer. So, of course, anything fried was going to be amazing.
Right.
So they went back and they told their friends about that amazing dish that Chef Fritz made for them. And then before you know it, people just started coming in and asking for this dish. And that's how it all originated. It was an accident. And if you think about, I want you to realize something about my story. I didn't say anything about breading.
Right.
So a lot of the ravioli, toasted ravioli that you'll buy here in St. Louis is breaded. They'll take, I actually know a restaurant that made some great ravioli, and they would take the regular boiled ravioli and then just bread them and then fry them. So those were just delicious. Now, where do I eat them? Sadly, what I think was one of the best ravioli makers, Mama Toscano's, closed. They just sort of, the owners kind of aged out of the business, and so they closed. But the Charlie Gito's that I spoke about, my confession is that I had never been there up until about a year ago. And my friend Christine was like, I was asking her, I'm like, where's your favorite toasted ravioli? She's like, oh, you have to go to Charlie Gito's. So we went to dinner there, and with the purpose of trying these toasted ravioli, and I was very skeptical. I'm just a very skeptical person by nature. And wow, was I proven not to be skeptical. It was really good. I mean, really, I didn't expect it to be as good as it was. So I highly would recommend toasted ravioli at either of the places that originated. And again, I always tell people if you're driving through and you need to stop somewhere, you can stop at a grocery store and they will have toasted ravioli that you could throw in a cooler, eat frozen on your way to wherever you're going. They're not going to be the same. These are mass produced. They're not horrible, but they're not as good as they could be when you get them fresh. And I know Charlie Gito's makes so much of it that is made fresh in-house.
Pete, you also do tours to Italy. You do culinary vacations to Italy. And tell me a little bit about this, because I always am excited when you can not only go and do a food tour that lasts maybe an afternoon or half a day or something like that, but this is a whole several days of enjoying amazing food, and you're in Italy. Tell me about your idea behind this.
So, COVID changed a lot of things for everybody. It impacted everybody. And so, I had pre-COVID, I had 3 walking tours, and then I had to shut 2 of them down, and the hill survived. And during that downtime, I had a lot of time to think about what I wanted to do with my business, with me, and sort of plan. It forced me to think about stuff. So in the back of my head, I always wanted to do these multi-day trips. I had been traveling. I'd been traveling since I was a kid, but to Italy for probably the past 10 years prior. And I always wanted to meet or to bring people from the US to Italy and have them have the same experience that I did. And yes, it is a food tour, but it's also about the people and these people that I introduce you to on the tour are as much an integral part of the experience as the food itself. And the food is really amazing. If you go to my website, tripstosavor.com, on the front page, there's a picture of our truffle experience, the family that runs our truffle experience. And I just absolutely love this family. You'll see the older man on the right is Luigi. He's the dad and he's the actual hunter. You have Luca on the left. He's one of two brothers. He's the winemaker. Brother, which is not pictured, Simone actually is a chef. And then you have the stars of the show, the dogs.
Of
You've
course.
got those dogs, aren't they beautiful?
Yes.
They're just beautiful. That's they call it the breed is called Lagotto Romagnola. It's a Labradoodle.
The famous truffle hound breed.
Yes, and the older one up front with Luigi is called Ricciolo. He's about 3.5 years old last year. And then behind him is his son, Rospo. And Rospo, so the names are, Rospo is 5 months old. And so Ricciolo, the dad, Ricciolo means curly because of his hair. And Rospo, the word means toad because he's so little. It's cute. It's just adorable. But these dogs, we go out with them. Luigi teaches us all about how they're trained, which is just fascinating. We get to watch them detect where these truffles are and dig them out. Luigi doesn't speak any English, so Luca, his son, does a lot of the translating, and then I also translate also because sometimes my guests will be asking questions. Luca's got information that he's trying to decipher from what his dad said. And then there's censorship. I have to censor some of the things that are said, Like last time I was there, Luigi, people were talking about how the dog was so well behaved. And Luigi, like a stereotypical Italian male, says, "Yeah, he listens better than my wife does."
Oh, geez.
So yeah, I did not translate that because it was actually a group of women that were on the tour, all women on my tour. So, so yeah, not only am I a food tour guide, but I also do a really good job at censoring things when they need be.
You may have saved his life, is what may have happened there.
Exactly. You'd be surprised a lot of people don't know what a truffle is, or I would say if they know what a truffle is, their assumption is that it's a mushroom.
Mm-hmm.
The difference, I don't know if you went through this on another show or not, but the truffles are actually edible spores, and they grow underground. It's an underground fungus. It's part of the Tuberaceae family, and it's technically not the same species because mushrooms grow above ground while the truffles grow beneath the surface. And surface, and it's usually around the tree roots, and it's usually in damp areas. So it's really fascinating to see these dogs go and find these truffles that are beneath the ground. And I'm not talking about just lightly beneath the surface. These can be pretty deep. Sometimes the dog is will be standing there, and we'll see him dig and dig and dig, and he's really like excited, and we're all kind of looking at each other like, where is it? Because he still hasn't gotten to it yet, but lo and behold, they always find it, you know?
The nose doesn't lie.
Yeah.
You know, it drives me crazy. I'm glad you brought up the mushroom thing, because it drives me crazy when people say, "Oh, it's just an underground mushroom." Yes, they're both fungus. They're both fungi, but they're completely different species. They're not mushrooms. They're truffles. They're tubers. Essentially, is what they are. And the other thing that you bring up that I think is really interesting, Pete, that people should know about is that these dogs are highly trained. I mean, it can take 2 to 3 years for one of these truffle hunting dogs to be ready to go out and find truffles. So because of that, they are an incredibly valuable part of the family and their business too, because these are the guys that get it done. Humans can't smell truffles. They could go digging randomly around trees and pull up unripe truffles, but the dog is the one who can find the ripe truffles that are ready to go onto your table and be shaved over pasta or scrambled eggs or something like that.
And as part of this experience, since you just said the uses of it, so not only do we do the whole hunting experience, but then we get to go and see the other brother and mom. So mom is Giuseppina, and Giuseppina actually has a cooking school in the town center in Upper Certaldo, but we don't go there. We actually go to their country estate, where it's beautiful. I mean, just the scenery. If you go to the website, you'll also see some of the pictures you'll see pictures of Giuseppina and the spread that she makes of food for us using the truffles. And, not just Giuseppina is cooking for us, but the other brother, Simone. Um, he's the guy with the beautiful Italian little mustache in the pictures. So, yeah, so they both cook for us, and we have some amazing dishes there. It's really, really a wonderful experience. I do want to just say, I think a lot of people think that dogs were always used to do truffles, but actually it was female pigs were traditionally used to hunt for truffles. But now it's mostly canines, because canines, once they're trained, they're less likely than pigs to eat the truffles
That's right.
once they find them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and there have been, if you see like an old truffle hunter in Italy, we saw this in Croatia too. They might be missing a finger, because trying to pry that truffle away from that pig can be a dangerous proposition. And we stayed at a B&B in Croatia, and we saw a retired truffle hunting pig. But as you said, Pete, it's dogs now. In fact, I know in France, and I think in Italy as well, it's illegal to use pigs to go truffle hunting because of the damage that they do to the ecosystem. Because when they dig, they just really destroy the roots of the trees. It damages the forest, and they just don't want them out there. And so I know in France they're illegal, and I'll have to check on this, but I'm pretty sure in Italy it's illegal to use a pig to go truffle hunting as well.
I'm gonna ask Luigi next time I see him.
There you go.
This September. This September I get to see him.
Perfect. What else? Anything else you want to say about your culinary vacations that you take?
I've always wanted to do this. Last year I did my 2 sold out tours, and then this year I still have a few spots available, but they sold out really the spots I did sell sold really early because the people that came back from the other tour told their friends. So I had a few cancellations due to health issues. So I have some openings for this September tour. Now, I also wanted to introduce a new tour. We're doing Puglia. So while I was there last year, in I think it was October of 22, I went and sort of did some research around Puglia and put together another culinary itinerary. And this one's a little different. The Tuscany tour, we go into a villa. Like I've got selected this beautiful villa that has a pool. We have um, a wonderful area that we stay at, but we only unpack once, and that's when you get there. Now, Puglia, we do move once because we stay, the first few days in one location, then we move down to another. So we get a change of scenery that's built into that tour. And also, um, people said, now they weren't complaining about the Tuscany tour. They just said, "Hey, that was a really aggressive itinerary." And I'm like, "Yeah, I agree, but I just want to make sure you get a good value for the amount of money that you're paying." And so
Sure.
they agreed. Like, as a result of my evaluations, they all said it was an amazing value for the amount of activities and meals that we cram into that week. So this one has a little bit more time on your own, a little bit, I can't say less food. I would just say more free time to get a little bit more relaxation into it. But definitely a lot of unique food experiences. And because the location Puglia is, along the water, we have a different scenery as opposed to the countryside.
Mm-hmm.
We do get a little bit of countryside on the Puglia tour, but there's also a lot of water. So, I mean, both of those itineraries are on the website. Puglia is wide open right now because we just opened it up for registration. That's to take place at the end of September. The good thing about Trips to Savor, which is the name of the small group tour company. So Eat St. Louis is the walking food tours, and Trips to Savor is the small group Italy tours. So I just did two different brands to market them separately.
Sure.
But I don't know. I'm just really excited, and the fact that people can actually sponsor a trip. So let's say that from my Tuscany tour, I realized that there's a lot of people that like to travel with their groups. So we had an entire family of women. It was all the women in the same family, and they like to do a trip every year together. And so they sponsored a trip. They essentially called me up, said, "Hey, I will guarantee that I will fill these spots, which is a minimum of 10 and a maximum of 12 people. So if you can get 10 people, which is only 5 couples, you can sponsor a trip. I'll hold that week vacation for you and put down some deposits, and it's yours. You've got until I think it's like 120 days out to have everybody pay for it. But that's a great way to guarantee that everybody that's on the tour. But some people like to do that, and some people take tours so that they can meet other people. And
Sure.
that's how I am. I don't know if you figured it out, but I do love people. I love talking to people. And so when I go out, if I take a tour, I do it so that I can meet others, and I talk to locals and figure out what is unique to that area. So
I got to say, Pete, we'll have, and of course, we'll have a link to your tripstosavor.com in the show notes at radiomisfits.com. But I did want to say, I love Puglia, and I'm so glad that you're doing a dedicated tour to Puglia, because I think a lot of people aren't even aware where Puglia is. If you think of Italy as a boot, it's a heel of the boot. and it's one of my favorite places in all of Italy. I love the people. I love the olive oil. I love the orecchiette. I love the rapini. There's so much to love about Puglia, so I'm really happy that you're doing a trip there. Well, Pete Manzo from Eat St. Louis Food Tours, thank you so much for being on Destination Eat Drink. It's been great talking to you about the cuisine of St. Louis. It's also been great talking to you about going to Italy. So thanks for being here.
Brent, thanks for having me on the show. This is pretty awesome. I just love telling people about St. Louis and all the wonderful things that we do here. Just one last parting thought. That is that I was just talking about the Hill. St. Louis is full of different neighborhoods, each one having their own personality and things that they're known for. So again, if you don't come in St. Louis for me, do it for yourself, because this really should be on your food radar.
Okay, there you go. Pete's a great ambassador for St. Louis, and those trips to Italy, well, they sound amazing. You can get in touch with Pete at stlouisfoodtours.com and tripstosavor.com. That's trips, the number 2, savor.com. I've also got links to Pete and the places he talked about in the show notes at radiomisfits.com/DED229. Well, that's it for this week. Next week, we're talking film tourism with Pip Jones, places you can visit where James Bond and Harry Potter movies were filmed, as well as Game of Thrones locations. So don't miss that. Until then, get over to destinationeatdrink.com. I just posted a story about the bridges of Lyon, France. Get that at destinationeatdrink.com/blog. I'm also doing foodie travel videos, so subscribe to my YouTube channel at Destination Eat Drink 946. I just posted a video there about the best things to do on your trip to Cordoba, Spain. You can also see the video on destinationeatdrink.com by clicking on the Videos tab. Destination Eat Drink is distributed by the Radio Misfits Podcast Network and a guy we toast with a toasted ravioli, Ed Silla. Thanks, Ed. I'm Brent Peterson, and I'll see you down the road.
Join us next week for another culinary adventure on Destination Eat Drink, a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.